In recent years, mental health experts have highlighted the emotional and psychological toll racial violence can have on Black people. From the ongoing trials to watching the traumatic and horrifying videos, these events are taking a toll on everyone's mental health. So I wanted to make sure we had time to call a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor, Dr. Shana D. to give us advice for how to cope. Dr. Shana, let's kind of start with all of these new terms a lot of us are hearing. Can you describe what qualifies as race-based trauma and how we know if we're experiencing it?
So race-based trauma is any traumatic event that is the result of a racial issue. So for instance, let's just talk about what's happening in the world. George Floyd's murder, us watching that as the community is race-based trauma. Even though it did not happen to us, anything traumatic is something that has a threat of someone else's life, perceived or real. We are helpless as a result of it. We cannot do anything about it. Dante Wright, watching that on the news, Breonna Taylor. I mean, there's so many of them that we watch as a community. It did not happen to us, but it is race-based trauma because the cause of the traumatic event was based on a racial issue.
We know our families and our communities, we're not the first ones to go get help and address issues like that. So what happens when you have racial trauma or racial stress build up over time and you don't address it?
Well, it's the same result as anyone suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So we have to understand it is an anxiety-based disorder. And so when we sit and we watch these things repeatedly, when they happen to our community repeatedly, we walk around at a heightened state of alert. The brain, actually, chemistry changes. We're always in a state of fight or flight. We can have stomach issues as well, significant headaches. It can create depression as well. You don't feel safe in your world. And if you walk outside every day and you don't feel safe in your world, that is a heightened level of anxiety that is going to have an impact. If we don't figure out how to deal with it, we are basically going to be slowly dying from the inside out because of the emotional effect that connects to our body that literally turns against us.
I wonder if you're experiencing this and you then have to go to work like so many people do, pick the kids up from school, and you end up in a situation with people who can't empathize with or invalidate your experience as a Black person in this country. How do you handle a situation like that, keeping a cool head, but also feeling like you spoke up for yourself and you can lay your head on the pillow at night?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important for us, first of all, to look for community where we do feel that people hear us and that we belong and that we can relate. So when we do have opportunities like what you just described to engage with folks who don't hear us, who don't believe our experiences, who invalidate what it is that we're sharing, won't have as great of an impact because we do have that space of community. But I would say to anyone, advocating for ourselves is actually a psychological component that helps us to feel better. So the feeling of helplessness is the one that continues to create more depression and more psychological distress. When we advocate for ourselves, speak up, say what it is that we're thinking, say, you know what, I don't agree with what you're saying, or I agree to disagree with you. Whatever the case may be, we typically do feel better. I think it is okay to tell people, I do not agree with you. I agree to disagree with you. And I no longer want to have this conversation, because continuing in a space with someone who does not hear you only is going to increase your levels of emotional activity, and you end up nowhere and you feel worse.
So Dr. Shana, we used our social media accounts to have people send you questions. You do this a lot on your own account. So I want to run a few of them by you, some that I feel like a lot of people can identify with. The first one is, how do you deal with discouragement knowing that there's no immediate solutions to problems with our justice system? Lots of people want to see things immediately, but that's just not the reality.
So we have to understand that no matter what is happening around us, we still do have hope that we can affect change in what's happening in our world, even if it's on a small scale. So if I can have important conversations with other folks, they may be difficult, but have them. If I can be in a space of advocating at a government level, do that. If I can go vote and make a difference in who gets elected, then do that. We cannot lose hope in our capacity to even make small changes that eventually create the large change we want to have.
Absolutely. Someone else was asking, I've seen a lot about anxiety. Someone was asking you, how do you stay informed without constantly triggering your anxiety?
We have to take what I call like media diets. We cannot consume it all of the time. We have to, I would say, really, if we watch it once a day, that's plenty, even if you do it once a day. But you have to stop and then engage in some things that you enjoy. Go back to your life where you can affect change in the space that you're in and not get overwhelmed by it, because it will overwhelm you and it absolutely will create lots of anxiety.
Dr. Shana, thank you for taking our call. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.